You're up. Morena koutou, and welcome to this morning's Finance and Performance Committee meeting. Just as a reminder, councillors and staff in the chamber here that we are recording. So welcome this morning. I'll just open our meeting with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, te hei mauri ora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Piercingly cold over the land, let the breeze blow over the shore, let the red tip dawn come, with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, and the promise of a glorious day. Let there be life. Very fitting for this morning, where we did have just that touch of frost and a glorious day, and we'll be spending it today here in the chamber. So I do have apologies from Councillor Kerry Sutherland due to illness. So can I have someone move Kerry's apology? Councillor Ward, seconded Councillor Gilmore. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. And we also have joining with us via Teams Councillor Franklin. Good morning, Councillor Franklin. Councillors, if you see me glance down at my phone as the presentations go up, we are unable to see if someone online wants to ask a question. So sometimes I might just glance down at my phone and if Councillor Franklin sends a message that she wishes to speak. So we have. Thanks, Councillor Franklin. We have no one here for public forum, and is there any notification of items not on the agenda? Appears to be none. Declarations of conflicts of interest in relation to today's meeting? No. Confirmation of the minutes. Can I have somebody move that the minutes are a true and correct record, please? Moved Councillor Johns, seconded Councillor Gilmore. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll just go through those. Page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and just the last page is signing 10. And then we've got the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the Finance and Performance Committee held on the 14th of June, page 11, page 12, 13, page 14, 15. Sorry, Councillor Gilmore.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Tracy. Page 15. Actually, it was just at the top of page 15 with the seismic assessment for the Ekatahuna Service Centre. Just wondering, in the minutes here, it talked about how that would be reassessed. Just wondering if anything had happened with that, or if we could get an update at a later point.
Make sure that an update's provided further. Don't usually raise these during the minutes, but I can bring it. I'll bring it up later. Thanks. Just make a note of that. Page 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20. Thank you, councillors. Right, we'll head straight into the reports, and a very good morning to you, Sarah, who's the finance manager, for the management reports. So I'll leave that for you to introduce your team.
Morning, everyone, your worship and councillors. Management report. We're going to do it a little bit differently compared to our last time. We've got a few show and tells along the way for you. Hopefully a bit more interactive, and one of the items we're looking for a bit of feedback on as well. So really good exercise. Just straight off, first thing off the bat, on the first page of the management report, I have got a typo in there where I've Thank you. I've accidentally said that our fire rate will be increasing from 69 to 74. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It is only to 73, which is still amazing news for our district. I have with me today Max. She is in our finance team. She is taking care of our funding sort of projects and things like that. She's done a wee bit of analysis for us on what the fire rate increase looks like for us moving forward and as we go into the long-term plan. So I will pass it over to her and she's going to run through a presentation with my superb IT skills when I share my screen, and away we'll go.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. So as you will have read, Waka Kotahi have increased our funding assistance rate or our subsidy from 69 to 73% from the 2024/25 financial year, or basically from the 1st of July 2024. So that's a lovely 4% increase. I just thought to put some context around our 73%, our new 73% FAR rate, just with some other councils. So South Wairarapa District Council, they're sitting on 51%, Marston sitting on 56%, Carterton 51%, and our neighbours to the north, CHB 59%. So 73%, quite a big jump. Others in our vicinity are Wairoa at 75%, the Potiki 75%. Yeah, and also I think the far north is right up there in the mid-70s as well. So it's a substantial jump. So basically, I've included a spreadsheet just to show the impact of the increase. And so if you, on the left-hand side, we've got the activity, we've got what was approved for our last 3-year funding round, just to give some comparison. In the middle column, which is the old FAR rate at 69%, and we've called it the hybrid option per council for what you talked about, your program of works, what you talked about when Alliance presented in your workshop. So that's what we've kind of based it on. So at 69%, council share would have been 22 or nearly 23 million. And if we look at a 73% subsidy, council share has dropped to 20 million. So that's a substantial drop based on that program of works. I think the thing to remember is that the numbers that we're using for the program of works are still being finalised and worked on by Alliance. So this is really just a kind of flag the benefit to council of the increase in the FAR rate. So the windfall gain, I guess, over 3 years is looking nearly at 3 million, which is not insubstantial. And the other thing, we still need to do some analysis on the depreciation, reserves and capital funding based on that work program. The other thing to note is that the increase in the FAR rate will also apply to emergency works. So currently we have an enhanced subsidy that sits at 89%. So that will also increase by 4% to 93%. So that is another great windfall for council. So that's cool.
Thanks for that, Max. And look, it is great news. The only comment I'd make is that when we had those discussions in the long-term plan around our aspirations and the roading, we did look at it from an unconstrained perspective. So it is still a lot, but you can clearly see where where governors were looking to increase drainage and issues like that from the cyclone. So still some further conversations to have. When we do the put an emergency claim in, when that new rate comes into effect, is it all works from that date or even works that are in the stream at the moment? For emergency works, and I'm not sure, you might not know the answer to that.
Ash can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it will be works from that date, from the 1st of July 2024. Yeah.
Thank you. That just sort of puts some perspective into why we're fighting for the 100% funding with Cyclone Gabrielle. Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Max and Sarah, for this. It is great news. It's fantastic news, and I'd be very keen to see those last two bullet points in that part of the section of your report promoted. And I'm looking at the media table for this. However, I just just want to sound a little bit of some thinking around the rationale to congratulate the team and promote this. But if you reflect on, and we will be later on, the resident survey, the importance of roading and how we balance some of the messaging to the community around us. But I just give my wholehearted congratulations to the team that would work together to be able to support this to come through, because it will have a fabulous impact on the community. So well done.
Thanks, Councillor Wards, and those congratulations extend out to the transport manager and the team at the Alliance for that as well. I still have aspirations. I think I'd like to be at 75, but it's a great interim step. And just for those online, the media table does consist of the chief executives. Making those notes and regretting sitting in the wrong spot. Okay. We'll continue through with the report, Sarah.
Continuing on page 23, we have included a section in the management report around external funding, just to highlight the volume, I guess, of how successful we have been in this previous financial year of securing unbudgeted external funding. It's quite a big number when you look at it holistically like that, $19.258 million. It's really exciting news for our district, and with the cyclone obviously extremely needed. We've given you a breakdown of where it's all sort of fallen. Just a caveat on this information: as we move into the annual report space, there will be some shuffling, that counting book journals that sort of happen, transferring the revenue from potentially this financial year into the next, as we review the contracts and make sure we're reporting it in accordance with how Audit New Zealand and accounting standards require us to. But extremely exciting news. On page 24, I've given a little bit of an indication of external funding that may be.
Apologies, Sarah. Can we just take a couple of questions? Okay, on the funding page? No, that's okay. That's okay. Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Ward.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to make a very quick comment on the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs funding, and I guess just a congratulations to the team and to Mayor Tracy for the work on getting that really significant funding. I have seen some talk in the community about that being council funded, and it is a really exciting thing that that's coming through external funding, and a large chunk of money, but more importantly, the difference that's made with that. So I just wanted to highlight that there, because it has been a little bit topical.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. And I guess when I look at this in top of the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, and that's $19 million into our economy that goes around it. It is a great news story. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. Just a couple of comments on this table, Sarah. When the to be confirmed, there's 4 of them there. What's the timeline on us understanding what the balance remaining might be?
Through you, Your Worship, the TBC is as we do the annual report and we make the assessment around what the spend is and how much needs to be carried forward. We will fully utilise the funding. Just to be clear, it's just the accounting transaction that needs to go in behind the scenes. But all the ones that I have said are fully utilised at June 2023. They're all fully utilised at 2023.
Through the question, through you, Tracy, the Three Waters transition funding, the DIA one that's been fully utilised as at 30th of June, what does that mean for the role that we have?
Brian or Raj might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. This is just what we have invoiced at this point in time to DIA for reimbursement of those costs. Moving forward, there'll be more funding in the next financial year. We anticipate more funding in the next financial year as we look to re-invoice for those. I don't think I'm articulating myself very clearly. Brian, I'm going to throw you under a bus.
That's actually correct. So how the funding works is that Peter will invoice what is our spend. So he'll collect his hours, he'll write out an invoice plus any other external resources that he's had to pay for as well, then submits the invoice and then the funding back based on that. So the total funding by memory was about $399,000. So we're nowhere near utilised all of that, and there will be additional funding coming as well.
Thank you.
I would just probably like to make a little comment after Councillor Gilmore's comments, and I do support your comment around the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. I too have seen the commentary that's out in the community, and it is a really important fact to highlight that this is externally funding, and it is about enabling our future generations and putting them in a place to succeed. Within the annual report this year, we're looking to bring this sort of information into an infographic-y sort of way so that it's more eye-catching and we're getting the information out there in different means. So just as a just to give you a little bit more confidence, I guess we are seeing the same sort of commentary and agree to get that information out any way we can is really important.
Sorry, Sarah, I just want to jump in and just add to what Sarah talked about infographics. So we just throw a number at you. Just looking at the para 4.1, the 19 million, if you compare that to our rates requirement or rates take for the current annual plan, the 19 million is 56% for rates take. So that's the additional amount that's coming into the district that is not drawing on rates. A substantial amount.
Okay, moving on to page 24. If I've got everyone's questions, sorry, oh no.
Councillor Johns.
24, or do you want to make a start on 24?
You ask.
Mic on, Councillor Johns.
My apologies. Through you, Mayor. 4.2, the fourth bullet point, 34 million from Waka Kumasaki in emergency works. At the money we have received. Or over what period is that for? An extraordinary amount of money.
Through you, Your Worship, Max might be able to jump in and help me out, or Raj as well. The 34 million is what we've been not guaranteed. It's been announced that we're going to receive 34 million at 100% subsidy to enable our works program in the cyclone recovery space. So all funding out that way. I don't think there is a time limit on when we need to have that spent. Looking at Raj or Max, do you?
No, there's no time limit.
34.
Yeah.
I think when Carsten and I were talking about this, Your Worship, you might be able to comment on this further. This is the largest amount of external funding we as a council have been granted and are to receive outside of our ordinary waka kotahi funding.
Premier Tracy, if I add to that, if you recall, the initial discussion we had with central government in regards to the cyclone damage, I think we pitched a number to them to say that Cyclone Gabriel had 100 million estimated impact. So out of the 100 million, we received 10 point as an initial response, and now we've given the remaining 34. So it's about 44 million that we've given for 100% subsidies to do the initial response and start the recovery. We are still in the process of working through them for the other 54 million that's going to come through for us to do physical works in terms of building back better or building back the district. That is where we need to then still have the discussion with them. And I think Mayor Tracy is working very hard on that to say that we still want 100% subsidy of the remaining 55 million, because it's still not affordable if they come back and give us at the far rate or the enhanced subsidy. So we're hoping that that discussion progresses. So we've yet to hear from them regards to the subsidy levels, but they have given a commitment that will work with us and work through the remaining 55 million that we initially pitched to them. So that it's a huge, significant amount. That one, I think the program for us to do that quantum of work, I believe the initial estimate that the Alliance did was from 3 to 5 years for us to consume the recovery, $55 million.
Thanks, Raj. Could I just ask Mike Dunn to come forward and he's got a comment?
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. I just thought I'd jump into there to say a couple of extra pieces on that funding. So the initial part that we got was the 10 million. So that's right. Then the other 34 as well, that's sort of come through as well as being part of the initial response. And that was, I think, if you recall, we had NZTA did a widening of scope for us for the initial part of that response to the recovery for the roading. So that was where that sort of funding's gone through. I think one part that I did want to highlight though, is genuinely because the work that they've done in that planning space for the projects is tremendous. And for us as a district, we're actually receiving some really good feedback from NZTA and they're absolutely happy with our work. So that's why they've actually said to us that we're looking really good in that space. And they're using us as an example as well for other districts for that recovery funding model. So I just want to put that forward.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. And I can confirm that is exactly the case when Waka Kotahi sit on the Mayor's Task Force for Recovery at the highest levels. They're actually complementing the teams. But for me, you know, and I am really grateful for this, it allows our residents, it shows the level of damage that we've actually sustained out in these communities, but it also provides that hope, and it's allowed the teams to keep planning, keep working on those really large problems. You know, if I think about the Maringa Gorge and things like that. But the message that I continue to send is that our deprivation level is at 8 and our people can't afford, you know, I'm grateful for the 73 cents, but actually under emergency works, you know, that still leaves us 7 cents to recover in every 100. You know, when you're talking another 54 million, that certainly adds up. But the team have done a phenomenal job and it does allow them to keep planning. You know, in the back, I guess at council, when we have a look at it, all the cogs turning, actually it's a lot to even account and process for that. So we've got some good systems in place and it is exciting. $44 million circulating around in our economy is certainly very, very helpful. But I know that if councillors that have been out onto those roads, there's a phenomenal amount of work that's taken place. So certainly acknowledge that within the Alliance. But it is great to hear that feedback, and certainly they are looking at our matrix of how we've done that and taking some of those learnings forward and sharing them with the other councils that have been impacted by the cyclone as well. So some good news, some very good news.
Could buy shares in Downer.
Just another one that I'd like to highlight, and it kind of flows on from what Mike has said and the tremendous work that the team is doing out at the Alliance. $2 million in additional funding's been approved for our Route 52 upgrade. That takes their external funding for that project to 16.6 million. It's really exciting what they're delivering out there and how we're progressing. Cool. Moving on to forestry section. I'm going to ask Raj to speak to this. He's the expert in this field as opposed to me.
To Mayor Tracy, we haven't progressed as quickly as we wanted to in this space, and given the current challenges that we have in the procurement space and staff capacity. But what we've done is we've made progress, and I'd just like to say that we are engaging them in two contracts, meaning that one is using Forestry 60 as part of agreement to be a forestry management contract. So that's one element. The second part is the gangs that they engage regards to doing silviculture work. And that's where we want to do a little bit of a procurement tension there in terms of the gangs, because what we want to do is that we want to make sure that there's an ability for our local forestry companies to participate or be able to be part of the procurement process in doing the silviculture work in Birch North. So that's why we took a fair bit of time in trying to understand and quantify the level of work that's required and come up and reasonably quantify what the budget is. And that's the amount that we arrived at. A little bit of work to do for us to tension it. And I think the way we'll tension is when we go out to the market and procure for the services. So we think that through the competitive process, we're able to tension it. But that's where we think the cost would be for us in terms of us doing the initial work that we have not, that's been delayed for the last year and a half to 2 years. So this will come from the forestry reserve, councillors. It won't be coming from rate funding. The forestry reserves, the main bulk of the work. The next piece of work that we're doing is that once we have the initial work out of the way, we now need to look at what's required to do the further silviculture and maintenance work for the next 2 to 3 years for Birch North. That we will do and bring back to council as part of the activity management plans for the LTP. So in the LTP process, we're looking to pull together an activity management plan for forestry activity, where we're going to talk about how this activity, it's going to, what's involved in the activity, the reserves, the ETS, and also what's sitting on the table, councillors, was that there was an intention for us to actually sell the forest as well. So we want to explore that option. So we thought the activity management plans will be the right vehicle for us to use and bring back and discuss about those options, about the future of forestry for council. So immediate impact would be that we are working through the contract to finalize both elements of it. We would like to say that maybe the next couple of months we'd like to go out to the market and contract the silviculture work as part of just focusing on Birch North Forest for now.
Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Raj, that $340,000, what does that cover?
To Mayor Tracy, just that covers both the forestry management fee plus the thinning and pruning that we have to do for Birch North.
That's just an estimate of what you think it might cost for thinning and pruning silviculture work.
Yes, that's the estimate that we have from Forestry 60.
And have you entered a contract with Forest 360 yet?
We have got the contract agreements with them. We're working through to do the contract. As I mentioned, we want to split the contract into two. One is engaging them directly to be providing the forestry management services to us. The second is through them engaging the gangs or the crew that's needed to do the silviculture work. So that would be a procurement process. We want to create the tension. And I think there's an ability for us to not just create the tension, I think the ability for us to actually have our local suppliers, local forestry companies participating in that process, rather than we contract the whole amount to Forestry 6.0 and have them use their suppliers, their preferred suppliers. We thought we will try and procure that and have the ability for local forestry companies to participate in that bidding and pruning work.
Thanks, Raj. So would Forest 360, would they go to the market and get quotes or tenders for that work, or will council do that?
That's the process, Geometry. That's the process we're working with Forestry 360. We've got two options. One is we directly can procure and they do the management for us, or we work alongside them and ensure that the manner in which they're procuring is transparent and allows the local suppliers to participate. I would prefer the latter, but that takes away a little bit of, I guess, capacity from the team. But we will work with them very closely in how they manage and go out to the market to procure.
Councillor Wards.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy.
Two direct questions. You said this activity, the estimated cost is coming out of our forestry reserves. Have we got enough in there?
Through you, Your Worship, the Forestry Reserve at 30 June had a balance of 878,000.
Second question, you quickly said it'll take several months before we even get going with anything.
Mayor Tracy, why I'm struggling to put a time frame to this is the priorities. As you can see from staff, from Sarah's report, that we still have not filled in the positions for the procurement staff. We are using an external contractor. We have high priorities that are coming through procurement in council. I don't want to commit definitely a time. This is sitting as a priority for us to look at. We are progressing it, and that's why I'm giving it a couple of months for us to go through the process. It's what if I put some context to you, the priorities for the team looking at right now would be, we are focusing, one is on solid waste contract that we have pushed out for 2 months. That's sitting right on top for us because we need to have that signed. So a fair bit of effort has gone into it because we're changing the mode of the contract. We have significant programs in Johannesburg Impounder Supply that we are supporting. And the team is working very closely with the Alliance in terms of the significant funding that we receive from Wakakotai and how we actually manage the procurement element to it. We have the better off funding, councillors, the 5 projects that we have kicked off into. It's a fair bit that we have, and we're using the one resource that we have. And reason why we've not gone out and used other resources, it took us a while to find the right partner who understands council's procurement outcome that we want. And that's why we are using that one supplier that we have. Paul is going to come in today in the afternoon to talk to your procurement. So good for you to be introduced to him. So that's why we haven't gone out and outsource this, because once you outsource this again, because we're looking at cost, and we're trying to manage that procurement in-house so that we don't draw on the reserve. I'm quite concerned about what's in the reserves too. There's a fair bit of work that we have to do. That's not just birch, not the other forest blocks that we have, but right across the districts that require significant work. And I think applying the self-funding principle that we had for forestry. So I'm just trying to manage the timeline. I'm managing the risk too. So if it's a high priority, we will focus it. Right now, it's sitting alongside the other things that I think are much higher priority than this. But we are progressing it. We have not put a pause on it.
So just further to that, and I appreciate the context provided there, Raj. Through you, Mayor Tracy, if we have 870,000, 878 in the reserves, is there a point having a discussion possibly not here, but possibly soon, is should we utilise that money to get the consultants or the resources that we're obviously externally using to not cut our losses, but this is something that's sitting right up there, we've all danced around, and everything else on our work. I mean, we all sit around here and say, what can we stop doing? Is there some need to perhaps feasibly look at using some of that money to, I don't know, I'm putting it out there, but this isn't going to go away, Raj, and I appreciate, with the lack of resources that you've got to focus on it. Is there another way we deal with this and get it off the work? I'll be contentious. Thank you, Mayor Tracy.
It's something that we have discussed. Is this the skill set, the returns, understand why we have, but actually would be quite keen to get some site visits underway so that new councillors understand these forests as well. And that's what, so whether we leave you to have a look at that and what can be done, Raj, that would be good. I've got Councillor Wallace and then Councillor Johns. Question?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I'm blinking. That's all right. A lot of the questions were answered just then, because first you said you were under a lot of pressure, other things, which makes we don't know the picture. I mentioned this in another attended just. If we don't know all the dots, we can't pull the picture. So that I feel like not down, but I can't, like I would say, why don't we do this? Like was mute 3 months ago in that we're going to look at forestry. 3 months goes like that, right? A year or like that. So I mean that respective, because we don't know what guys work like, So if we don't get all the dots, we make informed decisions. Same exactly Sarah Council Woods was saying. We probably need to have, I don't know, I don't think any business, I've been in council, is log, but if it's making lots of money, it's like any business. You go with it, so that it's like any business. And I know when I make money, I know when I don't, and I know when I stay with. It's the one that makes money. But it's simple. I think we're overcomplicating it. But again, to be fair to the team in the room, see them down. We don't know all the dots. So I don't know. What I'd like is a simplistic answer to that, as best as it can be answered, so we can make an informed decision and get on with it. Especially if the reserve is sitting at 800, but it's going to cost $1 million, you're 200,000 negative. It's simple as maths. So that's where I sit. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. In realistic terms, Raj, could you, what sort of timeline could you commit to that? And I think that's what councillors are looking for. Forestry is complex because it has got some carbon credits there that might have a potential impact. But what sort of timeline? Could it be the next finance and performance meeting? Yeah. That would be under pressure.
So, Mayor Tracy, the activity management plans comes back to you as part of the LTP. So you're looking at a range of activity management plans discussions in September, and you'll have a spillover in October. So that's coming to you. So if you ask me for a time frame, I would say the activity management plan is coming to you, will be coming to you in October. So that will be the time frame when you get what Councillor Wallace talking the fuller picture. You'll get the bigger picture in activity management plan, which will cover up all the areas. And that's where I think we can look and set directions for the forestry. So that's one. In terms of this procurement, I think let me go back to the team and have a discussion, taking on board what Councillor Sharon talked about. And I think we just being prudent. We just want to make sure that is this really critical and urgent that we must do it right now and we resolve it. We feel like it is important, it's urgent, but not time critical. That's why we're progressing it at a pace where we can and managing the cost. But you're right. the resource is there, but the problem is that you spend the reserve, money is gone, and we're just managing it. So I'll take on board your suggestion, and I think we are looking to progress this so that we can put the contract in place, do what we need to do, because we've got other things in the forestry areas we need to look at.
Councillor John.
Rose, you'll have to excuse my cynicism, but 2 years ago, we had already missed the boat as far as pruning substantial blocks of Birch North, simply because the trees had grown too big, and we're left with virtually no option but to thin only. But the position is now worse. So in other words, we've got a depreciating asset in that crop, depreciating beyond what it could be. And 2 years later, we're still getting the report that we've got now saying, well, we're working on it and we were talking to Forest 360 and we're going to put a contract in place. I've heard that 3 times in the last year, exactly that statement, but nothing's happened. Now, either we're under-resourced, staff-wise, Brian, and I know that's could well be is the case. So it comes down to priorities. And clearly, you deem it a low priority. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it's not, definitely not a low priority. And I explained to you that the projects that we have going on and where that resource is pulling. And I think if let's keep it this way. Let's say I get direction here from councillors to say that this is a high priority project and you want this done, say, the next 2 months. But get the direction from councillors today. Yep, then we'll commit. So it either be that the resource are used to prioritize this project, or we look at where we can. I'm not sure whether we can go out to the market and get external resource, but it's just reprioritizing this. Team is not right. I just don't want to commit a time frame specific for us. So let's do this. If you're looking for a time frame, let's say that we engage the contractor, we do the civic culture work, we do the pruning by end of the summer.
Oh, that's right.
Enough this summer. Yeah. So that will give us a time frame to put the forestry management contract in place, go out to the market to procure the gangs, and have the gang complete the civic culture work in the time frame that we have.
Executive will just make a comment, and then I also have Councillor Gilmore for a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just further to what Raj said, I think the important thing here as well is that activity management plan through the LT and the discussions in terms of the bigger picture around forestry. And I'm thinking that those discussions, we can really start concentrating on the outcomes in that, and then we can appropriately resource to what that decision might look like. And without, predetermining anything here, that's when I think we can put some firm timelines around it, because, just as an example, and I'm not saying this would be something we would do, but, maybe we don't even bother pruning and sell as is. So we've got to look at, I think, a range of options, and it is sort of continuing from the discussions that we did have yesterday around some of those options in terms of what we can do going forward and what some of those outcomes we're actually after, which could be, to get rid of it potentially. And then we'll resource it based on those decisions. So I think if we can wait out until the discussions through the LTP, or even any prior discussions we have that we discussed yesterday about some of these things, then, Raj and myself can look at those resources we'll need to do to get, to progress this, if that's okay.
Yeah, certainly.
Totally agree.
And we'll come back with those options.
We don't want to have another 6 months' time sitting here and going through the same argument yet again. You've been here long enough. You've been through a couple of them previously. And it's the same thing every time. I don't want to see that again.
I totally agree. So through your worship, I think give us the LTP and we'll come back with the range of options. It might be the implications are you might want to prune it before you sell it because of the cost price and like, you know, we've discussed that before. So we can bring that back to you, then appropriately resource towards that.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Wallace. Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, the only question I asked with that's answered our question, but I'm also reflecting on what Raj said. There's a reason why he's doing what he's done and been doing, because of the high priority of other involvements with these dots. So we're going to be down in that camp with the dots over here because we don't. You mentioned the recycling and all, or whatever you said before, recycling. Yeah. So that's paramount at the moment. Are we going to, you know, it's like having a bet. If we don't do that now, we'll lose more money there because we're worrying about trimming some trees here. This is where I'm asking for the guidance from the CE and corporate, that wherever we're sitting, we don't want to rule from our heart. We want to rule from our head. And that's why you guys have got those jobs. So I am asking for your leadership on where to go, because we don't want to just on a whim, oh yeah, that's what we did because we've been doing it, waiting. There must be reasons why you've waited.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. The Raj indicated those reasons as to why he has waited, but the Chief Executive has committed to that piece of work during the LTP, and I think it's a fair conversation. We talked about hard decisions that might need to be made. Raj, are you able to complete that work that the Chief Executive has said, and is there anything that you'd like to add or any concerns that you've got to Councillor Wallace's comments around what the implications to anything else that might drop off? I guess the opportunity to say is now, but we've given that direction.
I think I follow through what Brian talked about. The activity management plan is where is in the options, and I think that's where we can get the direction, and whether there's an intention for us to. The thing about selling is, I don't want to go back and talk about history. The thing about selling is that we had a couple of offers, but some of the offers we rejected it because they were not up to the market, and whether going out of the market right now is the optimal time. So this way, it is. But having said that, the activity management plans will bring back to you activity management plans with the options and let us have the debate there. You'll get a fuller picture with all the options, and then we can get some clear direction from you. At the same time, I will progress the contract and have the contract in place so that in terms of whether we do the pruning and thinning, which is activity management plans is going to be in October, it's a month and a half away, so it's not that far away. So I think we could hold fire on that, get some direction, and then decide what we want to do. Whether we want to go ahead and execute the contract and do the thinning or pruning that's required, or we decide to say what's the future of the forest in terms of selling. So I think we can get a direction, then I think then we'll be quite clear what we want to do. Cool.
Thank you, Raj, and we look forward to those activity management plans in October. And I'm not sure forestry is always a very hot topic within the district. Right, thanks, Sarah. We'll move on to Treasury councillors. I thought we would break for 15 minutes at 10:30 for a quick morning tea. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask Beth to come up and chat to you guys around the first, the 6.1 that we have in the agenda around the LGFA, the Local Government Funding Agency, and talk about the LGFA guarantee and how that sort of works.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. So, as you may or may not be aware, there's been some discussion out there in the community, concerns about debt that council has, and the debenture trust deed, which the concerns around that will be that if council defaults on a loan repayment, that the LGFA would have the ability to either sell or lease out ratepayers' properties. In response to this, the LGFA have put out a really good paper addressing these concerns. And I'm just going to give you pretty much a quick overview of what a debenture trust deed entails, the purpose of it, and hopefully give you some foundations to use to have these discussions with the community. So in order for council to be able to take advantage of more attractive interest rates on the market, we are required to enter into a debenture trust deed with the LGFA, and that allows us to join them as a shareholder and a borrower when they go out to market and tender for bonds, pretty much. So it has a two-step purpose, the debenture trust deed. So it firstly allows the LGFA to have security over our rates and rating revenue, if as per the loan agreements, which may be of concern, but there are a lot of hoops and processes behind that loan agreement. And it also allows the trustee of the debenture trustee to ensure and monitor compliance with the loan agreement. So throughout the year, council is accountable to the trustee to ensure that we're meeting all the loan requirements in the loan agreement. So that is by way of providing an annual plan to the trustee executors, the annual report to the trustee executors. So we've got a lot of milestones that we need to report on to ensure that we're complying with the debenture trust deed agreement. We are one of 68 councils that are guarantors with the LGFA, so it's not an uncommon group tool, deep instrument to use. I am open to questions. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at explaining things. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask away.
Can I just add to what Beth has given explanation to, just the number of things that need to go wrong for such a call on a person's property, which would be by way of a rate to get the debt repayment, is you would need most of the 68 councils to be defaulting. The probability with the reporting mechanisms that we have to do 6 monthly and annually is extensive, and I just want to highlight the probability of that occurring is extremely low.
Thanks for that explanation. Does anyone have any further questions on that? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, it's a finance company, really. And the guy, Corey Wright, he's one of the directors. I've done a fair bit of research into it. Is Tauranga sitting good with this? With like, so in a holistic, not a holistic, in a sense that what happens if we default on all our loans, or a loan, right? What is the security? Is it the rates, the rate payers? Because there's been quite a bit of stuff on different podcasts around the country about this, that Liz Dunn's done a lot of, I don't know if it's proactive or reactive or negative active, whatever active. What I want is just assurance for our ratepayers that we're doing the right thing.
For you, Mayor Tracy. So the LGFA was established by as a mechanism for councils to go out to market and achieve more favourable interest rates when they were debt loan funding for projects and other bits and pieces. As Sarah has explained, there are a lot of things that need to go wrong along the way and before the security over our rates and rating database is used by the LGFA. So not only do we have 6 monthly compliance reporting obligations that we need to report to the trustees executors, there are also other milestones that we need to achieve and supply along the way. So with the LGFA covenants, we also need to provide a certificate of our borrowings. We, like I said before, we need to supply our annual plan within 1 month of adoption. Same with the annual report. So the purpose of the trustees executors, they're pretty much a gatekeeper of the debenture trust deed. So the terms and conditions within the debenture trust deed are set out, and the role of the trustee is to ensure that council are meeting those obligations. So it would have to get very bad for us not to meet those obligations. So it's a partnership. So they're ensuring that we are complying with the loan agreement. And we've got those reminders from the trustees, executors along the way to prompt us when we need to provide the information. Does that answer your question?
Through you, Tracy. It's early days and trying to, what the benefits really is what we've got to sell to the ratepayers about what we're doing.
Councillor Wallace, the benefits in my time around the table on the interest rate that we received from the LGFA, I can remember having green eyes with envy if I could borrow money at those rates. So it has been very beneficial, which is why you'll see every council in the country taking part in it. Raj has just got a comment, and then I have got 2 questions, one from Councillor Long and one from Councillor Johns.
To Mayor Tracy, but just add on to what Beth talked about. I'm looking at it from a risk point of view, and I think hope I can give you a bit of process here regards to the default. So default meaning we cannot pay the loan or we cannot even service the interest. So that's the default. And to me, I go back to our annual plan process, our LTP process, where we go through the process of determining what's our budgets, what's our requirements, what's our loan, what's our capital projects, what's required, and then we determine to say this is our requirements regards to rates, and we go out to the market. So for us, if everything remains the same, there's no reason for us to default on an interest payment or on a loan repayment, because all of that should be included as part of the annual plan budgeting process that we go through. We also have a process where we do a variation during the year. Capital projects prop up and we have to do it. So we come through council, and I believe you ask us several times, what's our headroom? How are we going to service that? So we do have processes in place to ensure that the default or the breach of the covenants do not take place. So I think there's a fair bit of process internally that we already have, that we're managing that, and on top of the team looking at it. So I believe we've got a lot of, I would say, in our controls internally in part of business process to make sure that default doesn't happen. And to me, I would rely on those processes internally rather than at the end when we default what's going to happen. To me, the controls are in this entire process that we have to ensure that we are looking at planning. We are asking those questions as part of planning process. And whenever we have a variation to our program, we are asking those questions to say, is there a risk of us not servicing the debt or not repaying debt that's going to come due if we are doing things that are outside the plan or LTP budgets?
Just going to add on to Raj's comments. Our financial strategy encapsulates all of that. So we have had discussions on our financial strategy and we adopt that as part of our long-term plan. And for us to remain compliant within our finance strategy, it means meeting all of those control measures that we've spoken about.
Okay. Councillor Long, then Johns and Councillor Gilmore.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, Raj has pretty much said what I was going to say, is that if people do have concerns, it's the long-term plan that where they can bring concerns, but also it's our job to put in place the financial matters to give them confidence going forward that nothing's going to happen. Just the question, is this concern being brought up now? Is it because of the council losing their asset of i.e. Three Waters?
Tracy, I think Councillor Wallace alluded to it. There is a lawyer named, I think Liz, I want to say she's Gunn, who has taken, done a few recordings and publicly put it on YouTube that council, you don't know, making ratepayers aware that their property is could be taken. She hasn't mentioned in her video or in the podcast all of the control measures that are in place with each of the councils that need to go wrong. She has just gone, I would like to say it's more scaremongering, would be a fair comment around your rates, your property will be taken is the message she's giving. And we just want to make sure that our community knows that's not the case.
Thanks, Sarah. Well said. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. That probably answers my question. I just wondered why it was even in here, to be quite honest. We haven't had any ratepayers that are concerned or any inquiries in that regard, have we?
The podcasts and commentary around it are circulating. I haven't had any directly, but actually it's just to provide that safeguard and sort of, provide that confidence to people so that they don't get worried about this and they understand our control measures. Thanks. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks Beth and Sarah for running through it. I have seen some of the commentary online with it, and it's very political of nature and quite disingenuous with the way that it's put through. So I'm personally quite pleased for the clarification. I think for me, one of the really key points here is to reassure ratepayers is we have a legal responsibility to be financially prudent. If we're not financially prudent, and if we make the decision not to be doing that, then actually there's intervention that central government can do. So even if we don't do our job properly, there's actually even those controls that you've talked about, there's other layers of controls to force us to put those controls into place. So yeah, really grateful for you sort of talking about those controls, but the benefit to our ratepayers is absolutely astronomical for the actual discounts that we can get through those rate savings. So thank you. I'm really grateful you've raised it.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, can I just add to that too, please? As you mentioned, Councillor Gilmore, with the statutory requirements, we are unable to join and participate in LGFA tenders without meeting the statutory requirements. So that includes being prudent, having a balanced budget. So there are external controls from their end too before they allow us to join as a shareholder. If we weren't a shareholder of LGFA, and which then enables us to obtain these favourable interest rates, we would still have the same issue for, on the financial markets if we approached a banking institution. So there'd be still the same security issues that we're dealing with currently. So it's, I guess, to put it in simple terms, you would look at it as obtaining a home loan and your bank uses your house, your property as security over the loan that you've taken out.
Thanks, Beth. Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to set the record straight on the Liz Gunn conversation, Liz Gunn is not a lawyer. She's a former broadcaster who, during COVID, disappeared down the rabbit hole with all the conspiracy theorists. She's been sharing these podcasts online for several months now. I've watched every single one of them. She's set up a political party called New Zealand Loyal. I doubt she'll make the threshold of the number of members she requires. She's trying to raise $1 million. But everything that she spreads on these podcasts is absolutely incorrect. And does seem that she's got lost somewhere along the way. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Anybody who knows the background into this would understand that this is all just scaremongering and controlled by this group of conspiracy theorists, and that's it in a nutshell.
Thanks, Councillor Franklin. And, you know, it does take a lot of time by a lot of good people to answer misinformation, but actually the importance of doing so is important to our people and making sure that things are balanced. So I do appreciate the effort that you've put in, and it's been a good conversation, but yeah, also uses a lot of time as we've seen this morning. So, right, councillors, we will break and come back, have a cup of coffee and come back at 10 to 11 and resume. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, councillors. Are we back at quick facts, are we?
Borrowing headroom. Okay, borrowing headroom. This is, Raj spoke about this earlier. This is a hot topic and something that we monitor very closely, and we really appreciate that you guys monitor it just as closely as we do. Makes me feel a bit better in my role, knowing that other people are caring as much. So in here, I've got an explanation around the borrowing headroom, what it is. I've given us on page 25 a table that says what council's limits are per the current financial strategy set in the 21-31 long-term plan. And then I've given, just so you can see side by side, what the LGFA max limits are as well. So then if we move over to page 26, I've given a calculation, I've given a table for you on what council's maximum limits are looking like per the annual plan for this, for the 22-23 year, what our actuals results are now that we're at the end of 30 June 2023, and then what our proposed annual plan for the 23-24 year limits are looking like. This is with CapEx projects as adopted in the long-term plan. It does, in the annual plan, sorry, it does not include anything over and above that we'll be looking at impound supply, for instance, that will come back to council once we've got the workings around that. So as you can see, in previous meetings, we've been talking about the net debt as a percentage of revenue being our key measure that's got us with the least amount of headroom. You'll see in the table at 30 June, that's gone from 21 million to 73 million worth of borrowing ability. The primary driver for that is all of that external funding. So this measure is net debt as a percentage of revenue. Obviously, as we talked about previously, our operating revenue for this financial year is significantly higher, hence the increase in ability in that space. So as we move down the measures, you see that our cap measure with our external borrowing now moves to be net interest on external borrowings as a percentage of annual rates. I believe we had this conversation when we initially talked in the long-term plan workshop on the financial strategy, and with interest rates in the market, where they were going and whether this would be feasible moving forward. As this is now becoming our key sort of measure, you can see it's a limit that we will need to look at. At 30 June, our borrowing ability is 21 million. In the annual plan, it comes down to 18.9. So just making sure that we're reporting on this in each of our additional requests moving forward. The next table, I've included it for information purposes, I guess, and it's just showing you that if council in the long-term plan were to increase our maximum limits to what our GFA have, what that then looks like as well. So as you can see, the net interest on external borrowings, if we had that at no less than 25% as opposed to the 10%, that no longer is our capping measure for our headroom ability. It goes back to the net debt as a percentage of total income. So as at 30 June, if we were under the 175%, we would have borrowing ability of up to 90, I'm not even going to say that number, 90 million. Compared to the annual plan, which does not have our external funding in it, because we haven't budgeted for it because it's not a guaranteed income source, goes down to the 42.
Big difference. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks, Sarah. Yeah, you've answered some of my questions on that. I just want to, I guess, make sure that it's really clear in my head. So, looking at the first table where we had that near 73 mil sitting in there, so understanding that that's coming from the extra revenue that has come in that we haven't budgeted for. I guess making sure that, and you've mentioned in there that we'll take the lower of the three, because potentially and hopefully we will be having a lot of extra funding coming through, particularly for the Cyclone Gabrielle, 100% emergency works and some of the recovery funding that's coming in. So just to really get my head in that external funding that's coming in real terms for us won't actually sort of increase our borrowing capacity.
Through your worship, it comes back to the conversation we just had earlier. These are our control measures. No one control measure exceeds the other. We've got to remain compliant with all four. So by remaining compliant with all four, you move down to the next lowest available headroom, and that comes down to our interest. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. And look, it is good that that is at the front of our mind, and much the public with the Danneberg compounded supply, as much as the wastewater consents and requirements, both in Ikirahona, Pahiatoa and Whipple now. Right. Thank you. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that explanation. Can I, because I like to try and relate this to our own lives. So in the table 6.2.2, the very first column, the annual plan 2022-23, that's where we were at. That's an actual. The next column along is where we're sitting at the moment, as at 30 June. But in our annual plan, it's a heck of a lot lower. And is that because the reason being you haven't accounted for the external funding in that? No. You've got to step me through those last two columns, Sarah, and what that means in terms of, does that mean we've got less money to work with, or what we're planning at the moment will have minimal influence on? I'm trying to make sure those last two columns allow me to know, okay, we've got a bit more, because your statement down here says our headroom's diminishing. So I'm trying to understand, that's not a good news thing for me, as you know. So those two columns at the right-hand side, what does that mean in real dollar terms? Sorry, have we got less money to work with than we think we might have, or?
Through your worship, the first column, annual plan 2022-23, that was what our limits were when we adopted the 22-23 annual plan, right, your budget. The next column, as at 30 June, this is where our actuals have come in. This is where we're performing at 30 June as we've run these numbers. Your next column, annual plan 2023-2024, is as we've done just recently the annual plan budget. So for
this is good news then.
The headroom has decreased.
Yes.
But that's based on your capital program as it was in the annual plan. Remembering you did increase, Mike, sorry, I'm going to throw you under a bus. You might be able to jump in here and help me. We did increase some of those wastewater budgets in the annual plan with taking into account knowing that Eketahuna and Paeatua, we were looking at a lot more. Mike, did you want to comment any further than that? Sorry.
That's
It's a bit of
Through you, Mayor Tracy. Yes, so we did a lot of work, to be fair, in that capital workspace, and particularly for the annual plan. I know that we went up and down a fair amount. Initial indications, I think, put us at 33 million was the last one, and then we ended up going back to it, and we went through a massive amount of reforecasting and ideas about how our project should run. I think we came back to about 24, 26 was the final state of that, and yes, Sarah is correct in saying that some of those ones were primarily in the wastewater sector, those being the two wastewater treatment plants, and then the significant budget increases that were required in those two areas.
Did you wish to make comments? Yeah.
Very quick, and I think it's been answered from subsequent questions being asked and how Sarah's explained it, but I just want to reinforce, and I think what Sarah is trying to say is that in the past, we'd focus on one measure because that was the critical measure for us in net debt. Within the current environment, I think we're looking at all four, and the net interest becomes a risk for us. And I would say that will continue to become much of a higher risk, because what we're saying is that net interest, we budget for in the annual plan and assume interest rates, and we do know where the interest rate is moving. So as the interest rates increases, the amount that Sarah has got in her report saying 18 million, that would decrease. So that's why the team is actually monitoring the four benchmarks very clearly and understanding at any point in time, those debt headroom would change. Because if the lowest denominator is a net interest, that's a significant challenge for us.
Councillor Wallace, then Councillor Wards.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, because that first one at the very top there, the net revenue, it's ironic that they both come in a year apart. So the first and last column are identical numbers.
Me and a typo, I apologise. I can confirm that for you.
I think that's good. Things go up, but that stayed there. That's pretty cool.
It's more likely me.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Apologise, and I will confirm that for you. This.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Wards and Councillor Gilmore.
Sorry to keep focusing on this particular table, Sarah and Beth, but so what I've heard from Raj then, and you've explained, these are now the four measures that we need to be juggling around and keeping an eye on, not just one. So if we have a look at the last row, the liquidity. So liquidity in my mind is, are we not going to get yelled at by the bank manager because we've actually got. So talk me through then, because the difference between that middle column and the last column, which is what we're planning to do, it is quite significant.
It's double. I mean, or half, whichever way you look at it.
Through you, through you, Your Worship, this wonderful gift that is the liquidity measure has thrown me in a tailspin myself personally recently, where Raj had to walk me through it. So you're not alone, just to give you that reassurance. The way in which the liquidity measure is calculated is it takes into account your external debt. So your liquidity is your ability to pay your bills as they fall due, is the technical accounting term, give or take a few words. When we increase our borrowing, which means we have funds available, it increases our liquidity. So this measure, as your debt increases, it increases. It doesn't make sense in the scheme of a measure, but it did, like I say, it did have been a tailspin. Raj provided me with a better explanation than I probably have, so I'm going to ask him to speak to it a little bit more. He knew it was coming. Sorry.
I think in a simplistic term, it's the sensitivity analysis. The three measures up there, it's quite in terms of how you measure, you could use, it's not iterative in a sense that it is the net interest over percentage annual interest income. The numbers are fixed. The liquidity one is fluid because the more debt you go, the calculation changes. So there are a few variables in the liquidity. So we did sensitivity analysis in terms of liquidity, and we found that actually the measure that trips us up now going forward is the net interest, not the liquidity, because it's got few elements that are in it. So I think what the team is doing and put into the BI tool that we have is that sensitivity analysis, looking at all the four. So we make sure that any one time we are managing the four measures, but where we landed was the net interest measure is the one that we are focusing on right now. It may change if let's say situation changes, but for now that's a measure that we have. So if we increase the debt, I think we did some analysis to say about 10 million, the liquidity just dropped just slightly because of the components that are in it.
That's a blunt.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah.
If you go to the bank manager with those figures, it would be a very short discussion we'd be having.
Because remember, what LGFA is using this four tool is looking at four different elements in council and how it's measuring. So it's not using one tool to say, I'm going to gauge whether you have ability to repay or service the loan. It's saying that I'm using this range of measures that I'm looking at. So that's how LGFA has done the four measures. So looking at the range, it all depends. Some council would see themselves as maybe liquidity is a challenge for them because in which how they're structured. For us is, for now, immediate for us with the net interest is the one that we're concerned about. Reason why, bit of caveat, the reason why we say the net interest is a concern for us is two things. One is we see where the interest rates are moving compared to what we budgeted for. And as what Sarah mentioned, we have a few projects that are unbudgeted for. So that will increase the debt from a planned debt that we had. That means we're going to put onto council interest costs that we haven't budgeted for. So that's our concern.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, almost all of my question, I think, was answered through that. I did just want to, I guess, make the comment that this is, I can see how much work is in just these couple of tables. I'm personally really grateful to get sight of them and to have the opportunity to sort of dig into them, because when I had a look, it was just for me personally, getting my head around it took a bit, but this is so vitally important to us. So I'm really grateful for your time in explaining it.
I won't show the other 10 tables that make it so. Just make it even worse, I think.
Right, next item we have under Treasury Space is a walkthrough of the Power BI tool that we use, when we have our monthly meetings with our Treasury experts. This is how we monitor how we're performing. So bear with me. I'm a pro.
Sarah has asked me to just do a quick, simple walkthrough of the BI tool that PwC, who are our external treasury advisors, use when they are forming strategies for us. So the two areas of focus that I thought would be of interest to you would be the debt forecast. And so when they are looking at our debt forecast, we've gone and used 3 different scenarios here. So you'll see that the red line is 100% of our LTP debt forecast. The yellow line is 80% of our LTP debt forecast. And then is that orange?
Say really pinky colour.
The bottom line is with 3 waters. Without 3 waters, sorry. without three waters. So we base our debt forecast on the 80% of the LTP debt forecast, on the assumption that our CapEx program will not be 100% completed throughout the year and that there will be some carry forwards over into the next financial year.
Should that not be 50% rather than 80%?
Just quickly to confirm with that even though we call it LTP, we update the debt forecast on the annual plans. So the current year debt forecast is based on the current year annual plan. And why we say LTP is that because the annual plan only covers up to June 24, all subsequent years we pull the debt forecast in the LTP, but it's reflective of the current annual plan that's in place. So that means what you see in there, it includes the current annual plan, debt forecast and current annual plan. That's correct, Beth? Regards to that question, Council, you want me to?
Being somewhat facetious, but I did notice in here that we were about 50% of the spend on projects.
Okay. I guess I'll try and explain it. Beth, you can jump in. Is why do we do this, and what actions follow the scenario? It is our strategies. So what we're saying is that if, let's say, our total capital program for the year, for example, is 30 million, and out of 30 million, let's say debt funded is 15 million, 50%. So and we say 80% is 10 million, and we're saying that now we need to look at how we are going to actually have strategies to go out to the market to loan 10 million over a 1 year period. So that's our strategy. So we don't go to the max because we do understand that during the year there will be, during the financial year there will be, I guess, how capital projects is being delivered. It all doesn't start in the month of July and August. It spreads across the year. We also do understand that there are multi-year projects that you get that will span across. We also understand that projects will not complete, like what you said, Councillor. Current year is 50%. So we do know that we don't hit the target for multitude of reasons. So that's why we use 80% to inform our strategy. But every time that we are looking at implementing a strategy, we have a discussion with Mike to get an update where we are with capital project, what the forecast is, and we update our strategy. So it's a living document that we tend to use. But even though we use 80 and 100%, you're right, we could use 50, but I think 80% is prudent for us to make sure that we are anticipating that we are. Last thing we want to do in the current environment where interest rates are moving away from us, that something comes up, we need to fund, we go to the market. We're not, the strategy means that we are going out to the market late with a very high interest rates. We want to make sure that we and that's why the pre-funding is a very good tool that we use.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy, and through you to Beth and Sarah. Just looking at this table, and I just want to, I think I did ask a question on this when we've looked at it beforehand, and I just want to make sure this is clear in my mind, and if I'm right, make sure that you know, we're all really aware of it. Of the table kind of shows over a 10-year period, roughly, regardless of the scenario, about a $20 million drop in debt. That's not accurate because obviously new things within the LTP haven't been included in it. So am I right in that, just as the first bit? Yeah.
Just it is correct up until the last annual plan. So anything that happens from now post adoption of the annual plan for this financial year will get readjusted.
Thanks very much for that clarification. I guess the reason why I wanted to kind of mention it again is when we look at this chart, it could feel a bit more positive, perhaps, than what the reality is. And I understand the reason why, but it isn't necessarily going to go down to that level. So I think it's just really important that we're all really clear in our mind when we're looking at that, because this is a forecast scenario that we really sort of need to be looking at the next couple of years out to see how that line's tracking.
I'll just throw another comment into the mix on that, Councillor Gilmore. The reason why the debt is actually decreasing as you can see, it comes back to the finance strategy that was adopted in the long-term plan. Cam's my previous manager spent a significant amount of time in this space, and I think he took the councillors of that time on a journey that debt repayment needed to become a priority. And you can see, like you do mention, it is more favourable, well, it appears more favourable than it is, but if we didn't have the debt repayment strategy in place, how would that look? Again, just to highlight that, I think.
Councillor Wallace.
Just looking backwards, I know Sharon doesn't like looking in your rear vision mirrors, let's say. But from historical facts, right? This is all working as a prediction. How far off, like go back to a couple of annual plans 2 or 3 years ago, most of you people were in these jobs. As a percentage, how far were you ahead of the ball or behind the ball on average? I know there's a whole lot of things that can come in, but you kind of get a feel for it, you know, when you're doing something.
Debt levels, is that what you're referring to, Councillor Wells?
Well, the forecasting, the way you do it, everything else, you know, the tools, like when you're doing something, you get used to, you know, repetition is the mother of all knowledge, right? So you're doing the same thing in a different year. Okay, so do you feel like from past history, were you way off?
No, I think as you'll see in the annual reports, our debt levels have been pretty on par with what we had budgeted in our annual plans, or this financial year, I think was slightly less than what we'd anticipated. But then you would expect that given the level of completion of our CapEx program and what we're looking like in that space. Interest, it's kind of is as best as it can be on the day, if I'm honest. Beth will kind of talk to it later on, but for this financial year, we're tracking on budget. But if you ask me what we're looking like for our annual plan we've just adopted, given the interest environment we're in, I don't know that we've budgeted enough in that space.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Sarah.
And then the final tab that I thought I would briefly show you all. The interest rate risk, position tab. So this is what PwC use to base their swap strategies on. So you'll see here if I change this the month to October 23. All right, you'll see that we come out of policy in October 23. So we hit our minimum of 35%. So we're currently looking, working with PwC to look at swap strategies that we can implement. This, however, is going to be based on whether or not Three Waters is still around post-election. So we've got a period of 2 weeks after the 14th of October to form a strategy around that space. However, we're also keeping an eye on interest rates, and if they fall below the 4% mark, then we'll look to execute a swap in the form of a blend and extend, just because interest rates are rising, and we have got a few swaps available to use where the interest rate, correct me if I'm wrong, Raj, is favourable for us to use in a blend and extend situation. Have I lost anybody on that?
But we feel the nerves on the 2 weeks post-election. No. So I guess it's really around a strategy and a plan and conversations to how you mitigate that.
Okay, quickly, thanks. Great presentation, Beth. But just quickly on the right side, the right end of the BI tool, you see a few numbers there, just look at the current hedge, 59%. So what we're saying is that we have not hedged all, and why we're not hedged all is the fact that the transfer of debt for Three Waters. So we are conscious of not over hedging. Yep. And the other elements right down the bottom, you look at the weighted average fixed term rate, 3.01%. That is quite good given what's out in the market too. So that's how we look at the one over better with effectiveness of our strategy. So we use this tool to check how good we are in managing interest rates position compared to what the market interest rates is, or LGFA non-guarantee interest rates is. That's how we make sure that when we look at blend and extending swaps, the end result is we want to have a lower interest rate. That's what we're trying to do. And is that reflected in our weighted average interest rates?
See, through you perhaps to Raj or to whoever, just I guess on that comment of not hedging as much due to Three Waters, which I totally understand. Just wondering, I guess the thought process behind that, considering that Three Waters, the changes are at least 2 years away, potentially longer if there's a change of government, and I guess if that's factored into the thinking, because in a couple of years from now and perhaps longer, the interest rate, I guess landscape potentially is going to look quite different.
Yes, it has, and why we don't hedge 100% is it's also to hedge where the market is moving, because what the swap is doing is it's fixing. So we want to make sure that we don't hedge all our interest rates and realize that actually the market has to drop, and then we fixed ourselves in a very high interest rates. That's how we use different tools. We use the swaps as a tool. We use the floating and fixed interest rates as a tool. We use the length of the term as tools. So we got multiple tools that we use, and we talked at length about where we pitch the swaps, and we felt hovering around the 50-60% of the total debt is a good percentage to be in. But I think that's something that we talk about as part of our monthly discussion, and we'll continue to have the discussion. And the market situation changes, we got more certainty. I think the other thing is the uncertainty. I think that's what, okay, so the risk is, have we got a strategy right? We could easily get it wrong with the Three Waters. So that's why I think if there is certainty, that percentage might be higher, because the intention is to have certainty of interest rates. Hedging is a good tool. You have certainty. The uncertainty is not costing us to move it up higher.
I'll just add on to what Raj has said. The hedging comes back to our treasury policy as well. We put these self-imposed limits on how we're going to perform. You see on the left-hand side, there's a bucket. That's the 0 to 1 month, 1 to 12 month, and we have the minimum and maximum percentages that we hedge within that space. But also to come back to the strategy and the 2 weeks turnaround, our treasury experts are hoping that post-election, the market will get a bit more certainty. And so they're expecting interest rates to change quite rapidly within that time once certainty moving forward is sort of there. So like Beth said, if an interest rate was to come under 4%, we would look to execute in that space, but hoping for a bit of certainty in the market post-election.
Thanks, Sarah. And I guess, just to reiterate, councillors, we know that the finance team work with these experts on a monthly basis, which is also gives me a lot of confidence. We hear a lot of communication around the use of consultants or advisors, but they actually provide excellent value and service and give me a lot of confidence.
Done and dusted until later on in the agenda.
Taking on board feedback from our last finance and performance meeting, you'll see there's a few more bubbles in the mix. I've gone, because this wasn't prepared before 31 December, so for the first quarter, I haven't back calculated just with timing of getting the agenda sort of done, but I've given you the trend from December to March to June. I've given you how the annual plan year 2 budget is tracking, well, what the annual plan budget was. And then on the far right, I've given you actuals to 30 June 2022. So you can make a quick comparison between how we're sort of tracking. Key highlight, which I've mentioned in 7.1, comes down to our external funding in emergency works. We've separated that out for you. I think me, Tracy, briefly mentioned the work around engaging of consultants, and mindful that it is a hot topic in the community, and probably wanting to provide a little bit of reassurance to the community in that space. The consultants, I think me, Tracy, actually went through the report and counted and has a list. The consultants that we've engaged are experts in their field, and by no means am I an expert in a treasury field. Do not rely on me 100% to sort out our interest situation, because it's a realm that I'm just learning and getting into. So we engage them as the experts to enable us, and if we didn't, how would we be without them, to be honest? Is there any questions on the quick facts before we?
Councillor Wards.
Thanks, Tracy. As per usual, there's 2 columns that are quite critical. I love these quick facts. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. The 2 columns that I want to make a couple of queries or comments about are the green and the deep blue. So your actuals, what we've done so far, to what we'd planned to do. Okay, so 3rd and 4th columns in. So as we discussed before, we've got a lot more cash in the bank than we budgeted we might have. Borrowings is, they're all ticking along. We get down to capital spend, and that's the explanation of what we've spent versus what we'd hoped we might spend, and there are reasons for that, which Mike has talked us through. Fees and charges, though, there's a bit of a difference there. So we're getting in less than we hoped we might get from our change fees and charges. So I think I'd like to be a bit more mindful of that with our LTP. Big tick for the subsidies. Now there's another column that I just wanted to get some explanation on. Operating costs, where it's costing us less than what we thought it might do so far. Okay, and then the only other one that I wanted to just reflect on, because I'm glad you separated out the emergency works, and there's a great story in those last 2 rows. But the employee benefit costs, so where staff are costing us less than what we budgeted for, and is that because of, I remember a comment I made probably 6 months ago in the finance meeting, is the only reason we were looking okay was because we hadn't employed the people that we thought we might have. And is that still the reason for that difference there?
Your Worship, we had a conversation about this quickly this morning, and next finance and performance meeting, I'm going to give a bit more of an explanation on what makes up that employee cost, and maybe give a bit of an explanation. But to answer your question, that our delays in recruitment or recruitments where we've had to go out multiple times is a reason for that figure being less than budgeted.
Like those tables.
Oh, I thought we were nearly finished, but I've got a whole nother section. Sorry, I'm quite mindful of the time. Right, residents survey results. We gave you, attached to the agenda, a draft copy of our resident survey report that we get back from Key Research, who do our 3 waves of surveys each year. Councillor Gilmore has given us has asked a few times for a bit of a better comparison, I think, on how we're performing within our survey results and things like that. So taking on board that feedback, we had our wonderful IT man, who's unfortunately not able to be here today. So please bear with me as I look to demonstrate what he's created for us. He's taken our survey data from 2019 to the end of 2023 and he's built a tool for us to quickly demonstrate for you what the survey performance looks like, and we can drill down. It's got all the comments that have been provided by people. I think, Raj, there's a word for this chart, and you said it the other day, and I've forgotten completely. These are just the key words that are mentioned. As you can see, dogs is mentioned 280 times. Oh, you probably can't see that far in. I don't know if I can zoom in any further. So Dan has taken all this data, and I'll just walk you through a couple of things, I guess. It's really exciting. This is a work in progress. So if you do have any extra things you'd like us to consider or to put in, then by all means let us know and we'll get that actioned. And hopefully we'll be able to get this out to you for you to be able to sort of delve deep in. I'm told you can't break it, so let's see how I go. So just off the bat, Dan has taken our faith and trust sort of category that we have. We have financial management, our overall reputation, our vision and leadership. You've got all of the scores that were provided by people and the weighting that that score had. So the weighting changes depending on the success rate, I guess, that they have within the survey, so that you have a fair comparison between north, south, and female, male, and all those sorts of measures that are really important. He's got, so I do apologize, he said he hasn't completely filtered, so if there is a swear word in there, I hope thinks he's got them all, but just a disclaimer, there might be one or two in there. So these are all the comments for the wave over the time in which we've had it. So as you can see, 3 waves each year from 2019, and the number of comments there, easily to see. We've got a water management side. So he's done it based on obviously each of the, which I think you see in the table of the report as well, satisfaction per town, per metered, unmetered, and what we're sort of looking like. We can differentiate it to wastewater, so you can just see the results for just wastewater, stormwater. Overall KPIs, it comes back to that commentary again down the side, and we can move it between each of the key sort of areas.
That said, one of those comments was the council's not always truthful about what they're saying. That's similar.
We had a brief discussion about this, and it comes down to a lot of factors, doesn't it? And how the person being surveyed is feeling at the time.
Yeah.
It's quite subjective information.
And I think if I can, the thinking I have to do, that tends to be negative. They don't approach it with a positive view. It's, oh yeah, all right, it's all right. But that if all councils would face the same attitude. So if we're comparing it between councils, then but when I read through them, there was some where you could understand why it was a rate of only 44% or whatever it might have been. But if you went to ask those people and discussed it, they'd probably say, oh no, well, that's probably, yeah, no, I'm reasonably happy. So it's a question of, to what extent do you take notice of, other than comparing it with other years and a trend, I guess.
Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Watts.
Are we going through the report now, or was it at a later time?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, I guess if we're going to go through the report, I've got a few comments to make as we go through, but I guess one sort of overarching or a couple of overarching ones. For a start, and I guess it's to Councillor Johns's comments before, I note that we do this now via a postal survey, where previously it was telephone, that's right. So I guess it's something for us to bear in mind as well when we change the methodology of a survey that can, I guess, drive different results. So sometimes if something comes via post, it requires a different motivation level to fill in the survey and to return it than if someone just gets a phone call and they quickly answers it. And that can tend to drive people that are passionate about something to take the time to respond rather than just everyone else doing it. So I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. As a quick overarching comment though, looking through the report, and that this stuff does really interest me, because I do see it as a key metric for us as a council and us as elected members, asking our community what they think. And to be frank, in some of these points, they've found us wanting. And I think that we should be open to that and okay about that. But I think that we do need to have some discussion about what's fair, what isn't. If it's not, is it down to communication? Could we be better? Because all of those things, if we've been ranked low, we could be better. We could either be better at communicating why we've done certain things or better at delivering certain things. And then as we go through, and I mentioned this briefly to Mayor Tracy, my suggestion would be, if anything jumps out at us as being particularly concerning or particularly concerning to our ratepayers, that they get referred to the appropriate committee that is most closely aligned with the question for us to do some work on how we will either respond or how we will work to improve them. So I just wanted to make that comment to start off.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. And look, I agree with that idea. And I think when reading it, I try to dig down and ask the why. And there's some really easy ones there. There's some easy ones in communication. There's some fair comment around public meetings, night meetings, there's some, but I've also questioned some of the questions, and we need to understand or dig a little bit deeper into it to understand some of the answers. Councillor Woods and Councillor Johns.
Well, on your answer to this one then, Mayor Tracy, are we going to go page by page, or do you want an overall, because I have some overall thoughts and then.
So in the section for the report, I actually have briefly and just watching the time listed it section by section. So we'll go through in that way. But then I'm quite happy because I do think we do need a little bit of a deep dive into this to spend some more time. So if councillors, we have a long-term plan workshop at 1, councillors comfortable in taking the meeting into lunch break by 15 minutes, by 30 minutes, and we'll see what we can get through, remembering that we've still got the long-term plan and some issues to go through in here. So if you're happy with that, we can spend some time on it. Okay. Did you want to kick one off before I go to Councillor Johns?
Well, I'll do an overall one. I mean, and the draft report, this is gold. It really is. And I think that we as councillors, as we look into thinking about what we're going to plan for, need some of these top of our mind. When you look at further through the report, there's a matrix there of what to focus on, what to promote, what not to worry about, just monitor. Those are some of the key factors, I think, that we should remind ourselves that actually if we did try to put some effort in here, would it actually make a difference? And that goes to that why that you're referring to, Mayor Tracy. There are some significant concerns in this report though for me. And, when I see the key findings that have been summarised here, where the reputation is approaching the fringe of an acceptable range, there are opportunities for council and financial management, faith and trust, vision, leadership, quality of services and rates. So, I think we need to, And when you get to the 5-year view, I'll put one great big unhappy face beside that particular where the trends are going. So yeah, we've got a bit of work to do if that's what we decide to do. So happy to leave it there though, Mayor Tracy, as an overall.
Thank you. And like I said, I think there is some very quick wins. And if I give an example, there was an one particular issue in Ekirahona where there was some dissatisfaction. We went down, a team of us went down, had an evening meeting. I think we answered one question and cleared that up. And then we spent the next hour just an open Q&A. And some of it is being able to ask those questions where people are comfortable. I do think there are some quick wins, whether that's by Facebook, whether that's by quarterly meetings in the community. So I'll have a talk to councillors and just see where we can. And I know I've talked a little bit around some, mayor and councillor sessions where they're just there and making ourselves available. So no, keen to answer some of that. And also I think there is a large part around some of our communication, because when I went through and the reason I went through and analysed, where we'd use contractors and some of the finances and bits, was actually trying to, what I'm hearing in the community versus some of the reality that's there. It's just how we communicate that across, I think is really important. And, I think there was a couple of comments there, and I do quite like to understand, the views from towns. So, there was one there that, Ekirahona didn't receive anything, but I actually went through the financials and had a look at just what had been spent there. But actually, it's the way that's been communicated. So, always looking at what we can do to improve that. Councillor Johns.
Sarah, the previous survey, was that done by phone? Was that?
This long-term plan, so the 21-31, we changed the way in which the key research conducted the survey from being phone. So for the year ending 22 and now 23, it was by mail.
Reasonable. Yeah, ask that is that my view, people, if they're asked on the phone, tend to be kinder to the questionnaire. So if there have been 2 or 3% drop off in satisfaction, it's probably because of the way the survey's been conducted from verbal to written.
Sarah, I had Councillor Franklin just check in that this tool will be sent out to councillors so we can have that deep look. Nice. Okay.
It's something that we are able to make available to the councillors, but we would need to do quite a bit of work in our IT space before we're able to make it public on our council website, just because of the way the data is pulled from within our internal IT system. Don't want to get us in a hacking situation, so just I will take the experts' guidance to the space. Okay, did you?
To go through that section, that regulatory section now. And the other one, councillors, is do you want a session where we actually deep dive this together? Have a think about it. Right, if we flick through those. Okay, if I'm flipping through like that. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, councillor.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Personally, I do think it's valuable for us to have some deep dive to work out what committees would be best to work through it. That may be that a smaller group choose to do that, which is totally fine. But I think that for us as a council, there are some real opportunities here, So of how we look at our services, particularly as we're coming into conversations about the long-term plan. I agree with Councillor Wards that there's some real gold. So just I guess in response to you saying would it be valuable to deep dive, then I'd like to indicate that I'd be very keen to be a part of that.
Wallace.
Yeah, I agree in some ways, but most ratepayers in Dannevirke ask 3 questions, right? When's our rates going down? When's our services getting better? And are you going to sweep the leaves on the road? Are real simplistic things, because it's just people hurting. You know, are we overcomplicating all these, dotting the I? I respect Councillor Scott and what he's saying, but yeah, I think we want to focus on that. Yeah, are we spending our time in the right places?
Thanks, Councillor Wallace, but those, you know, and I guess the affordability is at the top of everybody's minds. And the challenge is when we want an increase in level of service, but actually we want the rates to go down. So it forms part of a wider conversation. But I think understanding is good. You know, like I said, there are some quick wins, there are some opportunities there, and there's certainly some areas that we can improve in. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yes, I liken change slightly. When we go out to consult and we call public meetings, we get a handful of people turn up. So that basically indicates the level of satisfaction that there is in the district, that they think, well, it's all okay, we're not complaining. Or if they were very dissatisfied about various things, they'd be at those meetings because they'd want to grizzle about the leaves that haven't been swept up or the state of the footpaths or whatever. So you can take a guide from how many people turn up at those sorts of things, consultation meetings, one kind and another. You know, we could spend hours and hours and hours navel gazing about what we could or should do to improve things. To what end? We might be able to put things in place, perhaps, I don't know. But I think we spend time on more important things than navel gazing.
Thanks, Councillor Johns. And look, I appreciate that side of it, but I think we went away from evening public meetings because there was low attendance. We moved into other formats, and there's some very clear commentary around there that actually people would like those back. So for me, it's a simple one, and give those opportunities. But I do hear what you're saying. Sarah, we will move this forward because we are at 10:02. This is not saying that we won't finish that conversation, but
Were you wanting to go through the service performance measures, or you want to leave that till the 7.3 report?
I think we can do our long-term program and just get some of that, and then we'll have that as the final piece, because it will, otherwise we could lose some time when we've got some very critical stuff to get through. Oh, sorry. Sarah, just while we're waiting. Oh, no, she's at the door. Oh, yeah, Angela, we just moved about a bit. Right, councillors, just before we go into the long-term plan program update, can I have somebody move that we receive the management report, please? Councillor Boards, Councillor John seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Koutou katoa. So this, because you're all involved in the LTP, this is, you'll be aware of what's been happening. So this is a pretty brief update. I will just make one correction to
3.5. The finance policy, strategy and infrastructure strategies are likely to be finalised early October after the AMPs are done. So that was my mistake. Yeah, does anybody have any questions about the LTP process?
Councillor Wards.
Well, not a question. I mean, on page 39, if that's what you're thinking about, Angela, currently we've got a great big round yellow circle, but the importance of the next step with the AMS in September is that's an absolutely critical phase for us here now. So I just want to make the point that we need to have our game hats on for that, because we're hinging a lot of the, oh, well, we'll wait. And, you know, with respect, Raj, that's what you're suggesting, you know, with that debate we had with forestry. That month, or however long that step takes, is absolutely critical. We need to have our act together doing that one. So I would have put that in a much bigger box, but, you know, that's just me. So.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Angela?
I have been in a regional group of LTP program managers, which is a great thing that happens across councils and sharing ideas and information and concerns and risks and whatever. And I feel like I'd like to thank you all very much for the number of workshops that you attend, that you allow us to provide for you. I think across our region, you have spent the most hours in LTP workshops, and wouldn't mind betting, therefore, that you're probably one of the most informed governance groups about all the different parts of the LTP. So I want to thank you for the time that you spend in LTP workshops, enabling us to tell you what we think you need to know, and I hope you're finding it beneficial to get all that information.
Thanks, Angela. And look, they are critical to us and critical to some of the conversations that we're having over the district around levels of service, around affordability. So thank you. Staff put a lot of work into them as well. Can I have somebody move that we receive the long-term plan update report, please? Councillor Chase, seconded Councillor Peter Weber. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Right, the 12-month performance report. Back to you, Sarah.
Oh, 12-month performance report. We will go through this with you with the help of Mike and Beth. I will cover off your operational performance. My goodness, that was a difficult word. And our service performance. Beth will do a section on treasury for you, which we've probably covered off most of it, but just the key highlights. Mike will jump in and talk about CapEx report, and then I think if we leave the full service performance until the end, that would be your preference, yeah. And we'll delve into that. So, operational performance. As mentioned in the management report, we've been very successful in securing a lot of external funding, and what we see there is that our year-to-date actuals for the year ending June 2023 are significantly more than what we budgeted by about 17-18 million, if I just did the quick calculation of the financials in there. Obviously, with an increase in external funding comes an increase in costs as we sort of do that. Mayor's Task Force for Job is a key sort of explanation, I guess, funding coming in, and then we actually just distribute all that funding out. So you kind of have an up and down across the board. I'll take the operational section as read, and I just want to draw your attention to maybe a couple of key bits and take your questions, I guess, because the explanations are quite detailed. So key activity, which I want to talk about, is the solid waste management. When I look back to the third quarter report, the trend has been we've been tracking to this year end result of $1 million overspent. Spent a bit of time in this space and done a lot of digging, and I've put it in quite black and white, I think, in the explanation for you. What makes up the variance? 105,000 of the $1 million is made up of fees and charges being slightly less. Then we go into the nitty gritty. Your unfavorable variance comes from 136,000 in carbon credit charges, where during the financial year, these fees increased after we adopted the budget from $74 per tonne to 86. We have the 215 in unbudgeted collection costs for the roadside bins. We've had this discussion before, but just to kind of bring it back to the forefront, when we did the long-term plan, we budgeted for the roadside refuse bins under the footpath activity. Wakakatahi said that we couldn't externally fund that, so the footpath activity has a savings, and this activity has overspend as we transferred it to the solid waste activity. What else have we got? Transfer costs were higher due to an increase in tonnage and costs, 193,000. The key one here comes down to the next bullet point, which is a 380,000 increase in contract costs for the operation of our transfer stations. The next, I feel like there's questions in that space. Should I pause?
I'll just sign.
But you'll recall when we went out and budgeted, this was before we had a contract in place, and it was a short-term contract. So those contract costs would be more, you'd expect them to be more, given we didn't know at the time when we did the initial budget for the year ending 23. The other key area I want to chat to is in water supplies. The explanation in there, I talk about it's a favourable variance, but I just want to highlight a couple of things. It is favourable overall. However, you'll recall we went through the grant funding at the start in the management report that we do some accounting journals to transfer the revenue where it sort of falls. So it's quite deceiving in that as a result of doing that in the 22 year, it accentuates the revenue in that period. Remember that the costs would have been incurred in the prior year. So it's a fictitious accounting figure is what I'm trying to tell you. Not to say that it's not true, but I just it's an accounting juggle between financial years. In this activity, we have a couple of key drivers which were unfavourable compared to budget, and we do talk about it where we've said showing an unfavourable variance of 442. I just want to delve into it a little bit. 139,000 comes into salaries, and that's where we have staff who have been, where we've got the actual staff salaries are in here. However, as part of the annual report process, we do a bit of capitalisation. So the likes of where we employed a project manager for the impound supply, those costs we've paid are in this sort of field, but that will be transferred out to the project. Just those sorts of staff and transactions to give you a context as to where that sort of comes. Expect that to come back down to where we sort of budgeted in that space.
Take a question from Councillor Johns, please.
Thanks, Mick. So the 229,000 less for metered water revenue. I presume that's more to do with the wet summer we had.
I think it comes down to the way in which we budget for the water revenue of the metered water, because our consumption has decreased slightly, but not a full sort of, to give you the full 229,000. But yes, your wet summer would have enabled the reduction. Yeah.
Consumption's not there.
It's enough to be, yeah. Yeah. The maintenance costs were over budget by 83,000. I think when you look at the service performance measures in the water activity, we had some trouble with the Ikitahuna water treatment plant a couple of times. Actually, I think it's 3 or 4 times during the financial year. So obviously costs associated with getting that back up and running and where it needed to be. And then the other one is in Dannyburg. So when we do the year-end annual report, some of those costs might be transferred out to the impound supply as a result of that analysis that we do. The other key thing here is our energy costs are 199 grand more than what we had budgeted, but taking into account that you've now got water treatment plants that have gone through significant upgrades, it's not unexpected. So those were the two sort of areas I wanted to highlight within the explanations, but I'll take questions on any.
Councillor Johns, and then did you have a question, Councillor Wards?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Item number 7, the Buxton and the Buxton reserves, 267,000 external funding budgeted to be received for the Lindau Walkway. Was that Waka Kotahi funds we were expecting? Do you know?
My understanding. And I note that that project's just been taken over by the Transport Manager. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. There's just a couple of items that I just have some quick questions on, Sarah. Under item number 15, health and safety on page 4950. I note there that we've got an overspend to the budget under the building consents activity of 315,000. I thought our fees were supposed to be covering.
I do recall this question being asked, and it is around some of our regulatory function because obviously when we don't want things going into general rates. Sorry, page 49 and 50, Raj, just on consent fees.
When it says it's the result.
An overspending, yeah, 350,000. I think I put how much is covered in the building consent versus general rates and chargeable. Yeah, so that's my understanding of our regulatory function, but
Okay.
hard to take in the general rates when we're talking about affordability.
I'll just finish my bit then if that's all right.
Yeah, Tracy. Under the item underneath that, district promotions and development number 12, we've got underspends in the community foundation area. I'm assuming that's because we haven't paid into those. Okay, cool. And the only other one in item number 23, support. We've got overspends in asset management due to unbudgeted external consultancy costs, but I'm picking from what was said next is that those will get allocated to the, we've got an underspend in human resources. I thought when we budgeted for the adjustments in those salary, that was all covered off, but there must be, is the process that you followed a timing one, or how's that?
How we budget it, we budgeted it in the 22-23 annual plan was we created an employee within the HR activity for the change in position and range adjustment and a change in pay grade adjustment. So there's 2 employees, that fictitious employees, so that we could budget it appropriately. However, as staff salaries have been paid, they've gone into the activities in which the staff relate to, is the best explanation.
And I've written the word question mark against strategy and development expenditures, 22,000 under, due to not filling the vacancy that the previous manager. I thought we had a strategy and development manager.
So this comment would come from Peter Wimsett, being the previous strategy and development manager, and then he moved into his Three Waters transition manager role. And then Adele's come on board and taken on that activity. So you've had the delay between Peter transitioning into, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mayor Tracy.
Got Councillor Peter Weber and then Councillor Gilmore and Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Mayor Tracy. I just looked, actually, I got a little bit wrong. Parks and Reserves. I was looking at the change in management of the Dennyvert camping ground, but there's only 2,000. It's only $2,000 difference. Yeah, I just read that. Just the solid waste. We get a lot of people complaining in the public about solid waste, and I've had to point out that it's coming from above through the government. So it's just a comment that's quite a big one, that people are complaining about the costs, and then yet we've put the costs up, but it hasn't been reflected in this yet. So next year it's going to be a lot more even and a lot lower. And also it was quite sad to see in that satisfaction survey that the recycling is, gone down. Like, people are less satisfied, but yet our services have increased. I thought that was bizarre. Yeah. So just a couple of comments that I noticed. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peter Weber. And that's, I guess, one of the, digging down a little bit deeper into the why becomes important. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just wanted to jump back to page 49, the health and safety activity. So down the bottom of page 49. Just a quick question on that. Just the first bullet point, talking about building consent and liquor licensing being under budget due to the timing of the licenses due for renewal. Just wondering, I guess, should we not anticipate the timing of their licenses, and if we didn't in this one, for future budgets, will we be anticipating that timing?
Through your worship, there was a bit of a staff change that took place during this financial year, so budgets were the staff that we have, current staff that we have. Anticipating moving forward, yes, I'd like to make the comment that we will be more aligned to what we base it off our actuals rather than what we best guess at the time. Not best guess, but informed guess at the time.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Tracy. I missed it, but anyhow, I can remember it. The power, you said something, obviously that's an obvious. If you're going to put motors and bits and pieces everywhere, energy's not created, it's transferred, and you must pay for it. How does that work?
Through your worship, I think it comes down to the manager that was on the ground at the time in which we potentially did the budgets, and maybe we didn't do a full analysis from my end. Maybe we didn't do a full analysis going, you've got these treatment plants, have you factored in that sanity check maybe that needed to be put over it, maybe didn't happen. But then also energy costs have increased in this financial year as well. So it's probably a combination of a budgeting, did we factor everything in, and then actuals being greater than what we had budgeted for.
Yeah, I thank you for your explanation, because it's just, yeah, they're the obvious things, like we've had in this room about GST being not put in here and there, and next minute but these little things, a small drip will always sink a big ship. A small crack will always sink a big ship, and I think we need to take that on board. No disrespect, but that's where we keep the pencil sharpened and that overview. Because if that crack gets too big, down goes the ship.
Councillor Johns.
Environmental health revenue, 31,000. What is environmental health revenue?
That's your food license checks and your cafes and all premises that sell food to keep everyone healthy.
Just to add on to that, if you looked back over previous financial years, like if I went back to the 22 12-month performance, you would have seen we would have been behind in that space. So relevant that we got the staff on board and it has increased this compared to what we'd budgeted. Okay, we will touch on service performance measures after the other aspects. So I will ask Mike to come up and talk about CapEx for you. It's probably not worth having up there looking at the size of it.
I think it's a big size.
At the end.
Have you seen it on this?
Yeah, but it was so exciting to read it.
Okay, well, I suppose I'll just jump into it, Metros, is that all right? So, hello again, back into the seat. Bit of a hot topic, I suppose. I note that we've had a few people already comment on it, so I'll definitely take it as read. I just want to, I'll put a bit of verbal commentary over the top of it as well, and then afterwards I'm happy to take questions or as I go as well, as required. I think, I suppose, what a journey it has been over the last year. I'm not a person exactly for excuses, and I'm sure that over the time period that I've been doing this, that I'm sure that you all understand that of me as well. So on that, we've been working very hard, I suppose, to deliver transparency through our projects and programs through to you, through our various committee meetings. Prior to that, it was the Works Liaison Committee report. So what I would like to say on that part is that it has certainly been a rough few years in terms of we've had COVID into our supply chain shortages. And then after that, this year, this financial year just gone, we had a major water issue at the end of last year, around December. We had some major rainfalls. And then after that, we were then impacted severely by Cyclone Gabrielle, which I'm sure that you're all tracking. I understand as well that a lot of these ones tend to focus on some of the negative parts around this, as well as just the financials. What I'd like to say, I suppose, on top of that, is that the financials may or may not, and I would say do not, tell the entire story of some of these projects. So having said that, I'd also like to make us fully aware that some of these ones is, on top of that, is funded externally. We're still working on making sure that we can actually present that data in a good way, or a meaningful way, should I say, as well as that. If you looked at one of the ones that we had just before that, Sarah has, and I think it was the quick facts part that we showed, that we had the emergency works one as well, which has actually been separated out of this. So on top of this 40 million, that was perhaps a ambitious one that was set for the year 2 annual plan. On top of that, though, we have spent a significant amount of extra, which is also constitutes a tremendous amount of work in that space. At this time, I don't have our savings as well for you for some of the projects that have been completed, that we actually will see a cost saving on that. Some of them actually have come in under budget, so that is a good thing, and I haven't been able to show that. You may be able to see some of that, though, in the expertly displayed capital expenditure report on the screen in front of you. I'm just going to step through a couple parts here anyway then. So the capital program by status, as you can see, I've tried to put it through for quarterly so that you can see that the work has progressed and then how that has. So I'm actually quite happy with how much that we actually did get through. If we go into the as required only one as well, I did make note at the bottom that that doesn't actually show the amount of work that actually goes into that. They are individual sort of projects that do crop up as required, and then go through the entire life cycle of a project to deliver that outcome.
So, need to take a question from Councillor Johns.
I know we've talked about, I'm not quite sure how we about it, but we achieved 50% of the project budget. And I realise that some of those projects, major projects, are multi-year projects. And presumably those multi-year projects, as far as the financial requirements, you will be applying budgeting. You're saying we're going to spend a third this year, a third next year, and so on. And if you're doing it for the financial budgets, would you not be doing the same for the capital programs for reporting purpose? There's little good tell us if it's going to be nowhere near what it's we've got, you know, 40 million dollars to spend, and we only spend 20 million. On the face of it, that's a terrible result. But maybe it needs to be. I don't know what the answer to it is. It means employ somebody else to put the figures, make them more sensible, forget about it. I'll live with
Councillor through Mayor Tracy. So I understand exactly what you mean on that and in the spending. If as I was going through this, I suppose if we can skip across those ones that actually have a bit of a detailed outline of what projects that we have completed. I mean, they are the high value ones in there that you can see. They do have a tremendous amount of work associated with those, but I think if you have a look at the budgets versus actuals here to date by group of activity, that should shed a bit more light onto where those projects actually sit that have had some of the unspent. So you can see there the transport section that has a major, or I should say a significant variance between actual year to date and total budget. That is as a result of Cyclone Gabrielle and our recovery works. And we also understand that there is a 3-year program of works and they have been scheduled out. So again, like we're not seeing, I suppose, just from that point of view, the overall work that's gone into that. The other part of that as well is that we also have the emergency works, which is also the financial lines that were spent on that. As well as Route 52 also resides in that budget's lines. We can see that the wastewater have also had a variance against some of actual year today in total budget, which is less as well. And those are our major ones that we've been out to the public on, which is our wastewater treatment plants and our wetland developments. And then we've also been under construction for the Dannyverk one. So part of these ones as well is that for example, the Dannyverk wastewater treatment plant that has been under construction has also seen some timeline adjustments based around the fact that we've had significant rainfall and then a cyclone that's also impacted us. On top of all of that work for the Three Waters place area is that we've also seen when I first started into it in this last year was it was the Three Waters manager position was vacant. We then had a brief I suppose, run from John de Villiers into that area, into the end of last year, into the start of this year, and then we've transitioned now, we've got Roger. So each one of those periods has also seen a bedding in time for those managers in particular to get their head around the entirety of the works that were required. And on top of that, they're all going to have to make sure that they understand that entire area. We've had from Roger in particular in that area has been doing the inbound and supply, and that's also compounded the issue in those areas. So we've had a transition of those pairs and then into that, people, old lingo. So yeah, so that whole area has then also seen operational issues that were just mentioned before that have also impacted the delivery of some of these programs and projects. So those are the main areas there that are seeing the shortfall in the spend. I think that if we didn't have such a challenging year into the start of this calendar year, I think that we'd be in a much better space from what we'd actually forecasted to spend. The professional capabilities of what we have delivered here, and I did highlight it somewhat at the end of this report, is that we have actually, fully embraced the project management framework here with associated templates. It has seen a bit of a peer review by both NZTA as well as Downer. They've both endorsed it for some of the usage, so we've seen some really good growth in this area in particular, and a professional development of some of our other ones, which highlighting some of the comments that were made earlier around power. They are now being brought into the considerations for future projects and planning. So yeah, I have a lot more confidence in these ones that we are currently doing, and we are obviously tidying up some of the other ones, but it's not to say that it wasn't there. It's just that we did have some forms of institutional knowledge lost in some of those ones and those changeovers. So suppose onto that, I'm actually very proud of the work that we have done and where we are to date. So following on for that, I'm happy for any other questions.
Thanks, Mike. There's been an incredible improvement, and I'm sure the public will really appreciate seeing this. It is incredibly transparent. I really like it. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Tracy. Just a couple of quick comments, some of which you've covered off, Mike, and I can't find that part of the report, but I remember it being in the infrastructure and no, I've got that. I've got the figures. I haven't got, but I remember in the infrastructure one where one of the figures that stuck out to me, Mike, was 215 in-flight projects, and I went, "Whoa!" Now what we have here is a financial summary of all of that, but the thing I'm mindful of is this is, and you've heard me rant and rave about, this is, and Raj will tell me regularly, don't worry about the CapEx, Sharon, we can borrow it and spend the money. And I'm a little bit with Councillor Johns that if we're going to be rating and promising the community we're going to do it, then we need to do it. But I think as we move into the next 6 months, we need to help with your advice and the input from everyone, bring your number of 215 in-flight projects to a reasonable number, which will mean we will nail some of the stuff that you reflected on. There's all really good reasons for it, Mike. I think you've done an outstanding job. I've seen it over the time I've been around this table. Huge improvement. We started out with a snakes and ladders, and into now, actually, I can trust what I understand and have the dots that Councillor Wallace refers to, a lot more dots lined up. So yeah, huge commendation to you and the team. It still raises questions for me, which I know during the next 6 months we will have to help you and your team to say, actually, I know we've deferred some and we've said no to some, but actually maybe we need to be even a wee bit tougher with your input. So huge ups.
Tracy, thank you very much for that. I suppose actually one of the comments I read on the survey report was could be a thankless job at times, and to be fair, I went from about a decade of a thankless role to another thankless role. No, thank you very much. Yeah, that we do have a lot of in-flight projects, and that is across the entire portfolio. I suppose part of that as well is that and some of the ones that you will be seeing will also be that we have, project planning and business case development as well, and some of those may or may not also feature in some of those. But that does also significantly increase the workload. But when we get some of those projects and programs done, then we have to be transparent in the delivery and make sure that we are planning them out as robust as possible. So, no, thank you. Noted.
Councillor Long.
Thanks for that report. You were talking about the staff changeover and also the vacancies. How much of an impact is that having on some of these projects? Give us percentage-wise, just off the top of your head, in completion rate.
Well, I mean, if I was just to look at the financial part of that, I mean, it would just have to be based around our three waters. One is that, and the only reason why I'd make that comment is genuinely is because of that. We had the short stint from John de Villiers and then into Roger, who's now settling into the position. So that's the only reason that I'd make that comment on that area in particular, because I mean, it's a huge amount of work to then get your head around, and that, seeing one in and then another one in, it just means that they've got to have a time period in which they can actually settle into that role.
Yeah, I fully get that. So what period of time is it delaying some of these projects?
You're right. Can't take them anywhere.
Through you, your worship, it's really hard to pinpoint an exact figure, but one thing that I can say is that we've continued to progress these projects, so we haven't stopped. I think it's just that resources have doubled up workload. So, and for example, the impounded supply is not at this stage a one-man show, concentrating on that. So Mike and Sarah and myself, Steve and others, Jess, are all a part of a wider team that's supporting that project, and will continue to do that. I guess what we're trying to get in place, and we are out on procurement at the moment to get a program manager, and I think we'll have someone very shortly, someone to start leading and making sure those dots start joining up a bit better. But we're certainly progressing this, and we are still on track. So Tonkin and Taylor are providing a lot of, a fair bit of resource around this and a lot of the timeline, so that we're working towards. So, for example, the push out until January, in my view, wasn't because of anything that we had going on in terms of that resource. It was some of the delays around getting that detailed design work done for the impounded supply and looking at that summer season. So it is a team effort regarding that project, but we're certainly still tracking along quite nicely regarding it. But it does cause some disruption when someone leaves and someone else has to pick up those reins.
Thanks. Councillor Wallace, you've got a burning question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Yeah, that was kind of I was a little bit worried about the technical aptitude of Roger because of, he's not a de Villiers, and that's what I was worried about, the cost to the council and itself, because I imagine that now you've contracted out the brains for the development of that, because Roger's got strengths in other fields, obviously, coordination and that.
Councillor Wallace, we're not discussing individual staff members, we can discuss projects. I'm on a really tight time frame here. Councillors, I allow all questions because I like that open discussion, but I'm actually going to have to reconsider that, considering we're nearly 25 minutes over and we're not through this report. And I did commit to councillors that we would have some time to discuss some of this at the end. So please think about your questions. And Councillor Johns, there's a lot of pressure on you for this question.
Be very quick, but I'd like to endorse Councillor Ward's comments about work you've done. And I'm well aware of the resource or lack of resource and the other issues that you face, but it's good to be able to see that they're all listed and they're all being taken care of, or whatever. But well done, keep up the good work.
Yeah. Thank you. There are some staff members we have with military training and discipline in place, and of all those staff members we can see that very clearly through councillors. While we're acknowledging that your work through the cyclone response, those strengths came through very, very highly. So thank you. Right, final.
Yeah, I just wanted to put onto one of those as well, just as the final part. We have been able to maintain some of that through the office and everyone else's work, the institutional knowledge for these projects as well, to maintain momentum as best as we can. So what I can say is that, and I know, is that the way that some of these ones have gone the best they possibly can with the resourcing and the staff and capabilities that we have had available. So again, I'm happy and proud of that genuinely. We are growing the base here as well for project management, and part of the software that we have also brought on with our management framework has also enabled us to really learn from a lot of these lessons. That actually has provided us now with a database of that actually does a lookup as you enter risks, issues and other concerns relating to projects of those similar natures. So it's definitely helping us out going forward into the future as well for all of these sort of projects and programs. So again, thank you.
Sarah.
I'll take the Treasury report as read by you all. I'm happy to take questions throughout. If I could just direct you to page 43, we'll have a look at the Treasury performance dashboard. I'll just go over the key highlights in there. You'll see that our finance costs are pretty much on budget, and that is reflective of our hedging strategies that we have in place, and just goes to show the value added by our external Treasury advisors and the work that they do on that space. You'll also see that our interest cost performance, we had budgeted an weighted average interest cost of 3.04%, and we were able to achieve 3.11%. So it's pretty much spot on in that area. With our cash position and our planned borrowings, we're behind in our borrowings and ahead in our cash position, but that is largely due, in part due to the CapEx program delivery. So that explains why we're favourable in those areas. I go back to the actual Treasury report itself on page 64. We've discussed most of these highlights in the management report. Last report, at the 9-month report, I gave a little overview on swaps. So pretty much we have those in place as a financial instrument to effectively achieve fixed interest rates. So we pay a floating rate on our borrowings, and in return we implement the swaps for those councillors that weren't here to then achieve fixed rates. We've already discussed the falling out of policy in October 23, which we will work with our external advisors and form a strategy on which swaps to implement at that point. We also have some $4 million worth of debt due to mature in April 24. So that gives us an opportunity to pre-fund for that debt. So I'm currently reaching out to the banks and looking for indicative term deposit rates. So with pre-funding, we take the opportunity to pre-fund if the rates are good and favourable for a period of 6 months or longer. So any term deposit terms less than that, the payoff isn't really worth it. That is pretty much the highlights in the Treasury section. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Okay, we'll move on to the debtors report. Eleanor is not here today. She is unwell. So I'll take the report as read and maybe take questions that I can come back to you with answers to at a later date, because I by no means am an expert in the revenue field.
Does anyone have any questions that they would like to come back to?
Just one lead phrase really quickly. Curious to understand how the applications for rebates are. Well, it'd be nice, I mean, at some stage, and I mean, there's a bit of a trend analysis there, but yeah, I'd be curious to think that'll be one of the things that will happen. Thank you, Metro.
Something Eleanor puts a lot of time into, so we'll come back with that. Thank you.
In the final two sections in here are the self-funding activities. Forestry we've talked about in the management report that states what your reserve balance of 878,000, and then we've got the pensioner housing. Through earlier conversations, me Tracy has indicated a deep dive, so we'll look to put that on a future agenda for you. We've got the reserve balance sitting there, which is 125,000. However, that was expected as a result of the completion of the Acton courts. And last thing on there is annual report summary. So just a heads up in your council agenda for next week, you get the gift of the 2022 annual report summary coming back to you as a just another check through the channels that it needs to go through. Right, service performance measures. Me, Tracy, I'll take them.
Thanks. Sorry, we just have a recommendation on page 41 that the report from the Finance Manager dated 14th of August 2023 concerning the 12-month performance report, financial year ending 30th of June 2023 is circulated, be received, and the contents noted. I'm happy to move that. Oof, that was unanimous. I'll take it. Councillor Wallace, all of those in favour, please say aye. Thanks, carried. Thank you, Sarah, for the enormous amount of work that's gone in there. Okay, right, councillors. We have got the service performance report and we have got a 1 o'clock meeting. It is 12:34. I did commit some time to this. I can see some councillors getting agitated there. Do you wish to have a very brief lunch, start the annual plan long and spend 10 to 15 minutes on this going through, or would you like me to set a separate meeting aside so that we can deep dive and have that conversation? And actually, I took some value from Mike's comments when he referred to something that was in there. So actually, I think there is some value in listening to a staff perspective on some of these as well. Okay. Don't think it is just a quick matter, given some of the comments and some of the changes in those movements. Councillor Wards.
Just a comment on that, or not me, Tracy. One of the things I noted down there was, will these change during our LTP discussions? And whether or not there might be value in, yeah, we might dig down now, but will there be more value in having a discussion when during that LTP time about, well, this was the previous service measure, because there will be decisions being made around, just a thought as to whether or not that might.
Most definitely, and I think it should come up at each of those conversations in their specific orders. Councillor Gilmore, does that meet with your approval and having that discussion as we go through? I think also if you share that tool that we can actually read all of those comments, it actually gives us far more detail in which to understand it as well.
It does, Mayor Tracy. I just would caution colleagues to to take this lightly, because actually what I saw through the report wasn't actually a dissatisfaction necessarily with council services, although that did come up. There was actually a very, very clear dissatisfaction with us in some of those aspects. So I would caution us to look at how we might be able to communicate and to do things a little bit differently. I certainly individually will be reflecting on some of that, but I would make that comment. But yes, it does.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. I don't disagree. Councillors, for the future of these meetings, is anyone opposed to a start time of 9 AM as opposed to the 9:30? I think there's much to discuss, but I don't like them going over so much, and I'll reflect on chairing and the questions and what we can do to improve those times there as well. But thank you very much for both the reports, but actually also the questions. There are many concerns in the community. It gives us a great opportunity to have a look at those. I love the transparency that's coming through and the greater understanding. So I do thank you all for your time in that. In closing, I'll close us with our whakataake. Let the winds of the Ruahine and Tararua give you strength. Let the waters of the Manawatu nourish you. For we are the Pounamu of Te Tāpare Nui o Whātonga. Kia ora.